Now, what if I asked you as an African to name three great superheroes of all time? Who would that be? Let me guess. Superman, you know, superhuman strength, speed, heat vision, and all that. Then maybe Captain America, a super soldier with enhanced physical abilities, strength, agility, endurance, and all that. And then maybe, Ruben Um Nyobe. The name doesn't ring a bell, right? Does it? Nah, it doesn't. Well, that's not your fault. It's because we as Africans have been conditioned by the imperialist educational system not to know about all African heroes who fought against colonialism and slavery to give us even the little freedom we have right now. So get ready for a history lesson that will inspire you and challenge everything you thought you knew about your past. So let's go. Have you ever wondered why most African heroes and heroines are not mentioned in your history books? Do you know that the history of Africa and its people has often been neglected or misrepresented in many history books and even in the mainstream narratives? Are you aware that due to the term limited education system that was imposed on us Africans by the West, we were vastly taught selective history about Mungo Park, the Lander brothers, Vasco da Gama, Amerigo Vespucci, Henry the Navigator, Christopher Columbus, and many other European explorers, instead of the ultimate sacrifices made by many brave African men and women who fought against colonialism, imperialism, apartheid, and slavery, and were silenced by Western powers. Friends and fellow citizens of Africa, both within the continent and in the diaspora. Today, Africa is Not in Hollywood would like to bring to your attention the story of an African hero who has been largely forgotten in the history books, a man whose story has been buried for far too long, an anti-colonialist whose story has been overlooked or deliberately erased, an assassinated anti-imperialist who played a pivotal role in the struggle for independence from French colonial rule. I am speaking of none other than the forgotten father of Cameroon, Ruben Nyobe. So, pay attention because this is a history lesson you won't want to miss.
La réunification immédiate du Cameroun, la constitution d'un conseil de gouvernement et d'une assemblée avec des pouvoirs législatifs, et enfin la fixation d'un délai pour l'octroi de l'indépendance au peuple camerounais. Telles sont, Monsieur le Président, les questions sur lesquelles le peuple de mon pays m'a mandaté pour venir ici. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Ruben Nyobe, who was also known as the forgotten father of Cameroon, was a Cameroonian political leader, an anti-colonialist, an anti-imperialist who played a very crucial role in the struggle for independence from the French colonial rule. He was brutally murdered by French forces on September 13, 1958. Though indigenously from the region of Bassa, Nyobe was born in 1913 in the southern region of Cameroon when Cameroon was under German occupation. He grew up in a society marked by colonial violence and exploitation. And after Germany lost in the First World War in November 1918, Germany was forced to cede control of its colonies, including Cameroon, to the Allied powers in 1919. Cameroon was then divided between France and the United Kingdom, with France controlling the larger portion in the east and the United Kingdom controlling the smaller portion in the west. This division was formalized by the League of Nations in 1922, with France and the United Kingdom granted mandates to administer their respective territories. Nyobe's father was a traditional priest in their village, where they practiced animism as religion. He acquired his Christian name Ruben after being baptized into the Christian faith. He was educated in Presbyterian schools in the part of the country occupied by France, and he could speak French, Bassa, Bulu, and Du. He became interested in politics at an early age. At the end of the 1930s, he was already involved in the Jeunesse Camerounaise Française, an organization set up by the French administration to counter Nazi propaganda. After World War II, he became involved with the Cercle d'études marxistes, a Cameroonian nationalist group launched in Yaoundé by the French teacher and trade unionist Gaston Donat. The group's mission was to fight with the same momentum against Nazism, racism, and colonialism. He was a key figure and founding member of the Union de Population du Cameroun, UPC, a nationalist movement that advocated for an end to colonialism and the establishment of a united, independent Cameroon. As the leader of the Union de Population du Cameroun, Nyobé embraced Marxist ideology and believed in the need to overthrow the colonial system and establish a socialist government in Cameroon. Nyobé's commitment to African nationalism and anti-colonialism earned him the admiration of many Cameroonians, but at the same time made him a target of the French government.
Nyobé faisait régner la terreur. Et à partir de ce moment-là, j'ai décidé de lui faire la guerre et de l'éliminer.
The French colonial authorities viewed Nyobé's Marxist beliefs as a direct threat to their colonial interest in Cameroon, and they saw the UPC's calls for independence and socialism as a dangerous challenge to their authority. As a result, Nyobé and other UPC leaders were subjected to intense persecution, including imprisonment, torture, and assassination attempts. Nyobé's commitment to Marxism also led to tensions within the UPC itself. While many party members shared his socialist vision for Cameroon, others kind of disagreed with his approach and tactics. Now, some felt that Nyobé's uncompromising stance and willingness to use violence in pursuit of the party's goal would ultimately lead to disaster. Now, despite these challenges, Nyobé remained committed to his vision of a free and socialist Cameroon. He continued to organize and mobilize his supporters even as he faced increasing persecution and harassment from the French authorities. His determination to establish a socialist and independent Cameroon was considered as a direct threat to the colonial powers, that means France and the United Kingdom, who actually saw him as a dangerous revolutionary, and so they sought to eliminate him and his movement. Now, in 1958, the French military launched a massive crackdown on the UPC, leading to a series of violent confrontations that culminated in various assassinations. In September 1958, Nyobé was summarily executed by firing squad. Now, after Ruben Nyobe was killed, his disfigured and bloodied body, almost unrecognizable, along with that of his collaborators, were dragged on the floor all the way from the forest to the village. Now, the French soldier who led the team that killed Nyobé and his associates, proud of his catch, he displayed their bodies in the village and invited the population to see. And the message was clear. It's all about sending a message to anyone who dares to do the same, anyone who dares to rise against the imperialist power. This is the man you all thought was invisible, and now he has fallen. That was the message. And just like in the case of Patrice Lumumba, The French authorities initially denied any involvement in his death, claiming he had been killed in a crossfire during a military operation. However, evidence and eyewitness accounts strongly suggest that Nyobe was targeted for assassination by the French forces. One source that provides an eyewitness account of Nyobe's death is the book Remember Ruben. This book includes interviews with individuals who knew Nyobe and were involved in the UPC struggle for independence. Now, the account proves that the French government, fearing that the independence movement would spread to another African colonies, so they sought to neutralize the UPC and its leaders by any means necessary. So what was the agenda? The agenda is that Nyobe's assassination was part of a broader campaign of violence and repression against the UPC, which included the arrest and imprisonment of its members, the killing of other leaders, and the use of military force to suppress dissent, just like they did in other African countries like Patrice Lumumba and others. So in conclusion, the assassination of Nyobe was a deliberate and calculated act of state-sponsored terrorism. 16 months after the assassination, on January 1st, 1960, Cameroon gained independence. For several decades, the name Ruben Um Nyobe was banned in the country. No one was allowed to ever mention the name, not until in the year 1990 that it was now allowed for people to talk about the key role, the contributions that these great men and women made in the liberation of Cameroon. Cameroon is the only country in Africa where those who campaigned, fought, and died for the country's freedom and independence from colonial rule have never made it to power. A country where the ideas and ideals of these union nationalists are still being suppressed by the unpopular system the colonial master put in place in the country after defeating these civic nationalists in a bloody war variously described as France's genocide war in Africa. This retarding French-imposed system still keeps the country, Cameroon, trapped in poverty, corruption, underdevelopment, dictatorship, despondence, and cynicism, thereby making Cameroon the most mismanaged country in Africa. Despite Nyobe's persecution and untimely death, his legacy lives on. And Africa is not in Hollywood. Always remembers him as one of the greatest anti-colonial leaders in Africa history. It is important we recognize and celebrate the contributions of all African heroes regardless of their race or background. By acknowledging the accomplishment of these heroes, we as Africans can challenge the traditional narratives and gain a more accurate understanding of our history. So friends, if you didn't know Nyobe, now you know. Thank you very much for joining, and I hope to see you next week with another great story of another African hero. I won't disclose yet. Thank you for all your comments, all the shares, all the likes, all the suggestions and all that. And I want to let you know that no name will be left unaddressed. Every name, every single African hero will be talked about on this page. Just be patient. Week after week, it's going to be the history, the story, the struggle of another African hero. So see you next week with another African story.